Welcome to the Pro Dental Podcast. Today we're joined by the British Association of Dental Nurses Chief Executive, Pamela Swain. Pam has been with the association for over 30 years now, so we're here to talk about her background, as well as what it's taken to drive an organisation like the BADN for so long, and also what the future holds as the association looks to merge with trade union community. Pam, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
So I wanted to start by discussing the fact that you have obviously steered the BADN ship for so long, since the early 90s. But what was your background before joining the association? Obviously, everybody knows you kind of in the dental sector and dental industry. But I understand you have quite a past, kind of before entering the dental market. And also kind of off the tail of that, once you join the BADN, what does it take to kind of run an organisation like this?
Well, essentially, I'm not a dental nurse. I've not got a dental background. So I'm a bureaucrat, essentially. When I left school in the mid-70s-ish, I went to Vienna for a year. I had a gap year before a gap year was fashionable. And I went to Vienna to work as an au pair with a family that were known to my family. So they had a newsagents and tobacconists. So I worked in the shop as well as their au pair. And I taught English to high school students. And I sold newspapers outside of one of the main stations in Vienna on a street corner in the freezing cold. So then after college, I worked briefly at the Home Office Research Unit in London. But I was already signed up with an agency to go back abroad. So in 79, I went to Brussels and I worked briefly for CPC Europe, who were an American mega company who made Knorr and Meitzena and Hellmann's and that kind of thing. And then I went to work for the Hilton International European Area Office, first in personnel and then in marketing. And then eventually I got cleared, I got vetted, which takes a very, very long time, to work at NATO, at the NATO headquarters in Brussels. So I worked in electronic warfare during the Falklands War in the early 80s, which was interesting. And then I went over to work for the International Military Staff in Operations Division. So I worked in the Crisis Management Exercise and Training Branch. And then I was assistant to the director of the Operations Division. And after about 10 years in Brussels, I decided Brussels is fine. It's a lovely city, but it's cold and it's wet mostly. So I decided to move to Bermuda. And I worked, well, essentially you had to work for 6 months as a temp. So I worked for Marsh McClellan as a telex operator. That's how old I am, because nobody knows what a telex is anymore, right? You don't know what a telex is.
You may have to explain it.
Yeah. Okay, it's a communications device before we had the internet, and it worked off a series of tapes. And it was a great big piece of equipment, and you would either type and it went through somehow, or you prepared these long strips of tape and then you fed them into the machine so it went quicker. But it's a very, very old method of communications, which is now defunct.
I feel like is it something we would have seen one of the old James Bond films, perhaps? I feel like
it's kind of like that. Yes, it's that kind of thing. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Yeah. And then I went to work for the Bank of Bermuda in their investments department. And then in 1990, I decided to take another gap year. And so I went to live in the States, in Boston, in Massachusetts, and do a massage therapy course. So I'm also an American trained and certified massage therapist. And then when I came home, I tried to set up my business, but a small northern town in 1991 was not ready for the whole massage therapy thing, because it was generally viewed as being something else. That gentlemen pay for, and I didn't do that kind of thing. So I had to live with my parents, and one day my dad came home with a local paper and he said, "There's a job in there. I think you should apply for it," which was the ABDSA, as BADN used to be called. And so I didn't I got the job, I think, because they didn't have any other suitable candidates. And there was a big fuss made in dentistry because I wasn't a dental nurse and I didn't have a dental background, and all the other associations did. But eventually, the BDA followed suit, and then a couple of others followed suit to have administrators, if you like, that didn't have a dental background. And I only intended to stay a couple of years, but 35 years on, I'm still there. So all of the stuff that I've learned sort of goes into running the association, because we have a staff of three. It used to be four, but now it's three. So essentially, we we all mix in. So my title is chief executive, but it could be chief cook and bottle washer, because that's essentially it. So we I was going to say we do the journal from here, but you know better than that. But we collect the stuff for the journal. You guys do it, um, but we do pretty much everything from here. So it's a kind of using the things that I've learnt from marketing and investment banking and all that kind of stuff all into one pot. I think one of the one of the things about my background is that I've lived in several countries, and I've mixed and worked with people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of nations. So I would think I get on quite well with people. I dare say there are other people that would dispute that, but so it's not it's kind of a broad background. So I'm used to sort of trying a bit of anything.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're sort of almost a bit of a pioneer if other associations kind of followed suit after BADN brought you aboard, obviously without the dental background, but obviously, I guess, due to your skill set and transferable skills.
Yeah, I think the ABDSA weren't exactly known for pioneering, but the three ladies that interviewed me, who were three past presidents, took that chance on employing somebody who was not a dental nurse. And although there was a huge fuss about it at the time, it worked out, So I think that was a good idea, because also the advantage is that these days I'm not a registrant, so I don't have to be careful in dealing with the GDC. I can say what I like because I'm not a registrant, so they've got no power over me. And also, I don't have the baggage that dental staff tend to carry. So, for example, when I was interviewed in 1992, I was asked, would you be intimidated going into a meeting full of men or full of dentists? It's like, well, no, because very often dental staff don't like to speak up in a room full of dentists, because there is that, the dentists are the leaders of the team and all the rest of it. Well, I don't have that baggage, so I'm not intimidated by anybody in dentistry at all. So I'm dental phobic, but in a meeting room, I'm not intimidated by anybody.
I was going to say, do you think, was there more intimidation in some of your past roles, sort of obviously previously than, yeah, kind of obviously
Oh,
coming in?
yeah. I mean, working for the people that push the button is kind of intimidating, really. Um, some of the military officers could be quite intimidating, but again, I wasn't military, so we didn't have this whole calling you sir thing, because I didn't ever address them, any of them, as sir. It was always by their name. But I'm from Fleetwood. I'm not easily intimidated.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to move along as well to talk about obviously. So over the 35 years, you'd have seen dental nurses go from obviously surgery assistants to GDC registered professionals with their own scope of practice as well. Looking back, what's been the hardest barrier to break down in obviously getting the rest of the dental team to view dental nurses as clinical peers rather than just support staff?
I don't know that we've particularly broken it down yet. I think, for example, when I first started, I went to one of the first meetings that I represented ABDSA at. And it was a big formal meeting around a big conference table. And it was chaired by some dental dean. And I was sitting towards the foot of the table. And I didn't know the rules. I didn't know that anybody representing dental nurses was not supposed to speak up. They were supposed to nod and agree with anything that was said. So when they got to the dental nurse part of the agenda, I said my piece. And as a one, everybody at the head of the table turned their heads and looked at me as if to say, does she not realize she's not supposed to speak? And that was in 1992, that was the prevailing attitude. You know, it was and still is a female profession mostly, but people from the ABDSA were not supposed to speak up. You were supposed to nod your head and agree with everything and trust that it was being done in your best interest. And that's what I say about not having the baggage, because I didn't realize that, but also I didn't care. So, and there's still something of that attitude today. There is still, from other members of the dental team, there is still the attitude, oh, they're just dental nurses. And sometimes from dental nurses, it's, I'm just a dental nurse. Well, we have banned the expression just a dental nurse. You are a dental nurse. You are a registered dental nurse. But it does still happen that other members of the team, particularly dentists, don't regard dental nurses as equal members of the team. Luckily, we've got over, or at least I hope we have, in public, dentist referring to his dental nurses as my girls, which used to happen. Oh, anything my girl needs to know, I'll teach her, kind of attitude. But there are still perceptions which are no longer true, and there is still although dentistry is over 50% female and dental nursing is about 99% female, the hierarchy in dentistry is still male, pale, and stale. And there are still some old boy attitudes around those people that are in authority and those people that are in government, quite honestly. For example, the 10-year plan, they wrote that, but they didn't consult with BADN, they didn't consult with the dental nurses. So they happily put together this plan, 20,000 more dentists and 40,000 more therapists and all the rest of it. Well, where are those 60,000 dental nurses going to come from? Because dentists and therapists can't work without a dental nurse. So they blithely forgot about that. And when we actually tackled them on it, we were told, oh, yes, well, arrangements are going to be made. So, there is still that attitude that from government and people in authority that dentistry means the BDA and dentists.
No, it's sad to hear. There's obviously still a lot more work for organisations,
Yeah.
including the BADN, to do. Obviously, we're hearing a lot from the obviously CDO at the moment, and obviously the CMA as well. Obviously about using skills mix to save NHS dentistry. Obviously, we know dental nurses at the same time are leaving in droves at the moment due to burnout and obviously stagnant wages. If the government does want dental nurses to take on more responsibility, obviously fluoride application has been mentioned and impression taking. What is your message to them regarding the current pay versus responsibility gap? And obviously, I think that ties into what you were just saying.
Essentially, we need a cultural change in dentistry, but we also need a structural change. At the moment, any practice that is paying their dental nurses minimum wage is not legally doing anything wrong. And because each practice is a business in its own right, they can set their own salaries. And we need a structure whereby they have to pay their dental nurses a reasonable salary for their skills and for their responsibilities. Now, that might change, that might vary across the country, but it still has to be a reasonable salary. And so we definitely need a structural change. For example, dental nurses that work in NHS practices are not considered to be NHS employees. The dentist has a contract with the NHS, but the dental nurses have a contract with the dentist. So they don't get paid according to NHS salary scales. They don't get access to the NHS pension. They don't get an NHS ID card. So they're at a disadvantage. During COVID, dental nurses were the largest group that volunteered to help out the wider NHS, but that was never acknowledged. And whilst they were doing that, they couldn't get their kids into childcare. They couldn't go shopping early morning in the supermarkets because they didn't have an NHS ID card. So this all has to be taken into account. And, dental nurses, there is not a dental nurse recruitment crisis. There is a dental nurse retention crisis. And thousands of dental nurses who are registered, who were registered, find out that they can earn more stacking shelves in Lidl, and they don't have to pay the GDC and their indemnity and their CPD. So they're saying, well, what the hell? It's no responsibility, but they're paying me £13.50 an hour. In fact, I think Lidl has just gone up. So if we could bring all these dental nurses back, there would not be a recruitment or a retention crisis. But we have to pay them reasonable salaries. And we also have to acknowledge that they are registered healthcare professionals and treat them as such.
Interesting. I wonder how would it work in terms of kind of a dental nurse takes a job with a practice. If it was an NHS or mixed practice, they would then kind of be kind of I guess welcomed into the NHS. Is that ideally how it would work, or would it be more of a sort of central?
I think so. I mean, our chairman Ruth Garrity and I spoke with Stephen Kinnock last week, and we explained all of this to him. And he sort of made the usual politician noises. But he agreed that we need a structural change. And so I think essentially, and this is a wider question, it's not just about dental nurses. I mean, I know dentists have got issues with the way that they are paid and all the rest of it. So I think dentistry needs turning on its head and restructuring completely. I can say that because I'm retiring. So, but I think it definitely does, or general practice dentistry anyway. But again, in the hospitals, you've got registered dental nurses who work in hospitals, not dental hospitals, but hospitals in a max fac or ortho departments in hospitals. They tend to be, the management in hospitals tends to be registered general nurses, and very, very often they treat the dental nurses like HCAs who are unregistered and unqualified. And we very, very often get complaints from dental nurses in hospitals saying, they're told to do HCA tasks. HCAs are assisting in the dentistry departments when they shouldn't be. They're they're not given respect as registered dental professionals by their management. And we've had to contact trusts probably 4 or 5 times in the last year where dental nurses are not being treated appropriately. So I think it's a question of education as much as anything. We have talked to the NMC about it, and they do not support the attitude in hospitals. But I think it's a question of explaining to general nurses that dental nurses are registered professionals, that they do have to qualify, they do have to have CPD, and they have a scope of practice and a code of conduct.
Just to obviously go back a little bit to you mentioned your retirement sort of coming up. I know obviously there's currently a move to merge BADN with community, so it's quite a bold move, and that's obviously I guess in a way perhaps going to be your lasting legacy, or kind of your final
No,
piece of your.
it's not my legacy. In 5 years' time, nobody will remember me, right? I know this because Jennifer Lavery, who ran the exam board for a number of years, died recently. I went to her funeral last week, And when I told our council, nobody knew who she was, apart from two of the older ones. So it's not my legacy at all. It's, yeah, once you're gone, you're gone, you know. So
We'll refer to it as a hidden legacy, or I think obviously some of the it's down to a lot of the work that you've done. Obviously, not only yourself, but
no,
obviously
no,
you have been a big part of
no.
BADN, and obviously it's a bold move, and obviously some might see it as BADN losing its independence, but kind of others are seeing it as a way to actually kind of get the legal and industrial weight behind BADN that's obviously needed to fight for better conditions and better pay. Kind of why is now the right time, obviously, to seek this partnership, and can a general union like community offer dental nurses? What can community offer that BADN can't offer alone?
First of all, BADN is a trade union. We have been since 1976 an independent trade union. We're not TUC affiliated, and we do not have any political leanings. As far as we're concerned, we support dental nurses, but we don't support any particular political party. And we haven't sought this. Community came to us and suggested it. They suggested the merger. We didn't go out looking for somebody to merge with. They came to us because about 18 months ago, they started a dental nursing section, and they've got huge resources, but they haven't got the dental knowledge. So we were talking about a memorandum of understanding in the summer and working more closely with them, so we could combine their clout, their political clout, and our knowledge. And then about November last year, they came to us with a proposed merger. So that's what we're balloting the members for in April, I think. Community is. I take your point about the independence, but were we planning or proposing to merge with something like Unite or Unison? Yes, that would be a valid point. But community is different in that they are an amalgamation of different unions, very, very different unions. And so they operate on a sort of sectional basis. So each of the unions has its own section within community, which is pretty much run autonomously. So the exec committee of BADN would transfer to become the committee of the BADN section of community. And essentially not a lot would change, except that we would be part of a much bigger group, which had a lot more political clout and a lot more resources. We're limited in what we can offer dental nurses because we have not got huge resources, whereas they have. So they can offer a lot more. In the sort of tangible benefits, they use the same company as we do. So a lot of those would stay the same. But they have a lot more benefits. For example, they can provide personal representation in disputes with employers, which we can't. We just couldn't do that. And so they've got huge political clout. So they can get meetings with ministers. That's why we met with the minister last week, because community sort of facilitated it. And so they've got this political clout, but they still operate on a sectional basis. So it's much more individual for each of their sections.
So they're almost like an umbrella organisation, and then BADN would sit beneath that as kind of as it has been.
Yes, yes, yes. Not a lot would change.
Brilliant. Obviously, the stuff that will change, it sounds like just kind of there, that kind of added oomph, so to
Well,
speak. Yeah.
I mean, I don't get to vote, right? Because I'm not a member. And I'm going to retire whether or not it happens anyway. That's just the difference it will make is when I retire. But I would not support anything that I didn't think was in the best interests of dental nurses and of BADN. So I wouldn't. If I didn't think it was a good idea, I would have said so. And the fact that I'm supporting it, I really do believe that is the best thing for BADN and dental nurses going forward. Because I think the days of the small niche professional association are finished or rapidly coming to an end, because all over this country and certainly Europe, volunteer associations are finding their membership is dwindling because younger people don't generally join things that they have to volunteer for. Certainly our membership has dwindled. At the same time, costs are rising. So when you're working on a very small budget, it's very, very difficult and you can't do various things. Whereas if you're part of a much bigger organisation, there are economies of scale. So you're not buying 250 leaflets, you're buying thousands, which works out cheaper. But also you've got much more power behind you. So even in dentistry, and it's not just confined to dentistry, it's confined to volunteer organisations. For example, I'm a seroptomist. Now, seroptimism in the UK has fewer members than BADN does. And in the Northwest region, it's gone from 39 clubs to 13 clubs. I'm a member of Blackpool, but I'm one of the youngest members. And I'm 68. So, you know, my nephew works for the Scouts and they're struggling to get people to be volunteers and run Scout troops. And everybody else that's in the sort of third sector will tell you the same story. So bigger is better because you've got more resources and because you've got more power. Instead of being a small organisation struggling to get along, I think it's beneficial for BADN to join a much bigger association but remain a separate sector so that they can continue to support dental nurses.
Excellent. So yeah, obviously with the resources there as well to kind of provide better support, but also keeping its
Yes,
identity. I mean,
yes,
I think, you
yes,
know,
yes.
from the
Yeah.
way you've
And
laid it out, it does sound like a kind of best of
yeah,
both
I mean,
worlds.
people talk about the name and the logo. These are questions that have been raised. But BADN has only been BADN since 1994. And we've only had that badge and that logo since 1994. Before that, it was the ABDSA, the Association of British Dental Surgery Assistants, which are with a different badge and a different logo, which was obviously very, very frequently mistaken for ASDA. So if you wore your ABDSA badge in the supermarket, people would think you were ASDA staff. And before that, it was called something else. When it was started in 1940, it was called the British Dental Nurses and Assistants Society. So it's had 3 or 4 changes of name over the last 85 years. So the name or the logo or the badge is not important. What is important is that it carries on as a body to support dental nurses and to promote dental nursing. It doesn't matter what it's called, a rose by any other name and all that stuff. It doesn't matter what it's called. It matters that it continues. And to be perfectly honest, if the merger with Community doesn't happen, it's not likely to continue. It's got another couple of years, but that's it. It's not likely to continue past another couple of years, and then dental nurses will have nowhere to go.
I mean, kind of on that note, obviously, I mean, one fear that obviously people have in mergers, obviously, is that the niche expertise gets sort of swallowed up by the big organisation. Obviously, I think you kind of answered this already in terms of BADN, kind of still having its, having that identity, but also, kind of keeping the spirit behind it. But yeah, kind of how would you reassure members that BADN's specific clinical identity, as well as its voice within the dental hierarchy, won't be diluted? Obviously, once you're part of a much larger union, obviously multi-sector union. I think again, that probably comes back a little bit to obviously the fact that they've already managed to arrange that meeting with Stephen Kinnock.
It would be the BADN sector of Community. So, as I say, our executive committee will move over and become the committee of that sector. So the members of that committee will be elected by members as they are now. And so there will always be a committee of dental nurses that are deciding which way the sector goes. But that committee will be able to send somebody to the overarching community council, but essentially the dental expertise, the clinical expertise, and the dental nurse knowledge will stay with those members who are elected to the committee.
Brilliant. And I wanted to kind of finish our conversation, obviously, by discussing the fact, obviously, you've dedicated your career, last 35 years nearly, to obviously fighting those who we describe often as forming the backbone of the practice, so dental nurses. If this merger does go through, do you see this as again, we sort of touched on this earlier, but the question I'd written down was, obviously, final piece of your legacy. Obviously, I appreciate your kind of feelings on that. But do you see it as kind of ensuring that dental nurses finally have the kind of industrial protection that they need? I guess, does it kind of make your 35 years of work, I guess, kind of worth it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, essentially, for the last 35 years, BADN has been my baby. Right, we had 400 members when I started, right, and shall we say, it was somewhat antiquated. And so for 35 years, it's been my baby. So if I'm going to retire, and I have to, I would rather see it go ahead in safe hands than kind of lurch along the street for a bit and then fold and completely go under. Because then dental nurses will have somewhere to go, and the support and the advice and the promotion that they've got will continue. Because not only are our executive committee continuing, but our panel of reps are continuing, our journal is continuing, our coffee catch-ups are continuing. So that will go forward. And nothing will change essentially for the first 3 years. And then as it sort of transfers over. But then the executive committee will be involved in any decisions for change. So I would rather leave and see it in community safe hands than think, oh, well, it's got another 2 or 3 years.
Excellent. Well, long may it continue. And just to, kind of before we say our farewells, for anybody, any dental nurses watching who, I guess, may not be a part of BADN, how can they find out more?
Go to www.badn.org.uk. You can sign up for our e-newsletters without becoming a member, but you can also click on the join button. You can look through the website, or most of the website. There is a members area, which is only for members, current members. And then you can join online. It's going up to £55 a year on the 1st of April. That's £1 a week. That's £1 a week for which you can get free legal advice. You can get, you can look at the members area. We've got CPD portal, so it's free CPD. You've got the journal with free CPD. You've got the coffee catch-ups with free CPD. You've got booklets and advice, all that kind of thing. And you've got what we call BADN rewards, which saves you approximately £400 or £500 a year. So there's everything from house insurance through travel, holidays, shopping, spa days. You can even buy a fridge and get BADN discount, So it's a mixture of advice and practical help. And of course, you can ring us up at any point and ask us a question. So for £1 a week, I mean, what can you buy for £1 a week? You can't even buy a coffee. You can't even buy a coffee these days. No. I think a packet of cigarettes costs 15 quid. A cup of coffee at Starbucks costs, I don't know, 3 or 4 quid. So it's an absolute bargain.
Okay, well, we'll leave links in the episode description so anybody can scroll down and find those. But Pam, thank you so much for joining us today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and it hasn't disappointed. So I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Bye.